It is the penultimate weekend of the college football season, and there is still a lot on the line for everybody. Whether if it's getting a spot in the college football playoff, as right now, I believe there are about 8 to 9 teams with a realistic chance of getting one of those four spots, making it to a bowl game. A lot of teams right now currently have 5 wins, looking to get that sixth win to become bowl eligible, playing spoiler, spoiling someone's national championship hopes, or just looking to finish the season strong to get momentum into 2024. Week 11, there was a lot that went down. Ohio State won convincingly. Georgia won convincingly over Ole Miss in a top 10 showdown in Athens. Michigan went on the road without head coach Jim Harbaugh, and they won against Penn State convincingly. That was a game that Penn State was in for a majority of the game, but then Michigan's running game took over. Florida State survived and advanced over Miami. Same with Washington. Survived and advanced. Oregon, they won fairly convincingly against USC, but USC, they made that game fairly close at the end. Texas survived and advanced against TCU, but they have lost running back Jonathan Brooks for the season with an ACL injury. Alabama was dominant. Oregon State was dominant, setting up a top 10 matchup with Washington this week. The 7 games on the docket this week: North Carolina Clemson, Louisville Miami, UCLA USC, Kansas State Kansas, Utah Arizona, Georgia Tennessee, and wrapping things up with our game of the week, Washington and Oregon State. We also had some head coaching firings after week 11 was complete. Andy Avalos was let go from Boise State. The biggest headline of the weekend: Texas A&M bought out Jimbo Fisher. We are starting to see coaches starting to lose their jobs here, as I do think that Dave Aranda and Sam Pittman are next, in my opinion. But that's just another conversation for the day. We just got to focus on week 12. Let's get right into the picks. First game on the docket this week: North Carolina and Clemson. North Carolina is coming off of a 47-45 win over rival Duke last week. Drake May is 4th in the FBS in passing yards with 3,145. Omarion Hampton is 2nd in the FBS in rushing yards with 1,236, only behind Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon II. North Carolina is 79th in total defense. As North Carolina, they have won their last 2 games after getting off to a skid in the weeks leading up into that. Clemson is on a winning streak themselves. They have also won 2 in a row. And Clemson, they have been playing better in these last couple of weeks. They have kept it close in multiple games. And Clemson, they have been a team this season that they have been their own worst enemy. Clemson is 6th in total defense. Running back Phil Maffa has 366 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns in Clemson's last 3 games. He's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Will Shipley is averaging 4.8 yards per carry. Quarterback Cade Klubnik has thrown 5 interceptions in the last 4 games. I think the difference in this game is going to be Clemson's running game in this matchup, with North Carolina being 78th in run defense. Despite the Tar Heels being 3rd in total offense, averaging 520.6 yards a game, being 8th in scoring offense, averaging 39.9 points per game, I like the Clemson defense in this matchup. As the last 2 weeks for Clemson, I have seen a much different Clemson team than in the beginning of the year. And I think Clemson wins this matchup. And I'm not surprised at all that Clemson right now is a touchdown favorite. I think the way North Carolina has been in the last month, I think rightfully so. I think Clemson wins this matchup behind their running game. I expect big days from both Phil Maffa and Will Shipley. I anticipate that they will pound the rock in this matchup. Louisville and Miami. If it weren't for the loss Louisville had against Pitt a few weeks ago, I would be calling Louisville this season's TCU. A team that flew under the radar, made the college football playoff. TCU even made the national championship game last season. But with the loss to Pitt, I think that Louisville is nearly out of the college football playoff race. And it would take a lot for Louisville to get in, even if they did defeat Florida State in the ACC championship game. I still think a lot else has to happen, but there is still a chance. And they go on the road to take on Miami, a team just like Clemson that throughout the season they have been their own worst enemy. And it all started against Georgia Tech, when all they had to do was take a knee and they would have won the game. And I do think that derailed Miami's season quite a bit. We saw them compete really well against Florida State last week. Mario Cristobal was absolutely irate over a safety that wasn't called that should have been called. And I do think that had a massive impact on the result of that game. Both of these teams are in the top 40 in total offense. Louisville is 29th, Miami is 37th. For Miami to win this game, they have to win on early downs. And Louisville is 8th in first down defense. Louisville running back Jahar Jordan has 976 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns this season. And also they have Isaac Guerendo, and he has had a good season as well. That is a good 1-2 combo in the Louisville backfield. If Miami can contain the run, I think they have a strong chance of pulling up this upset. In fact, I will pick Miami to pull off this upset. Despite Emory Williams being out for the season with an arm injury he sustained at the end of the Florida State game, and Tyler Van Dyke has struggled. He came on for the final drive, and he threw an interception on fourth down. So that's now 11 interceptions in the last 5 games. I think Miami, with not much to play for, Mario Cristobal, he needs a signature victory, and I think he gets it this week against Louisville. I just think we're in that month of November where upsets, they will happen where you least expect them, and I think this is one here. Miami has done really well at home this season, defending their home turf. They are 5-1 at home this season, with the one loss being to Georgia Tech, in a game that they should have won if they would have just taken a knee. UCLA and USC. UCLA is 10th in total defense, 2nd in run defense, only behind James Madison. Carson Steele and TJ Harden both average over 5 yards per carry for the Bruins running game. They're 9th in scoring defense, only allowing an average of 16.4 points per game. USC's defense has been the talk of the year, and it's not in a positive light, as every single week when I have done USC games for the channel, I've always pointed out how many points the defense has given up in the last X amount of games. In the first game without defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, they gave up 36 points, which that does show bits of improvement, but not enough. As good as UCLA's defense has been so far this season, this is going to be the strongest offense that UCLA has faced all season long. Caleb Williams is 2nd in the FBS in passing yards, with 3,249, only behind Michael Penix Jr. for Washington. The Trojans have lost 4 out of their last 5 games. They're 9th in total offense defensively. They're 120th in scoring defense, allowing an average of 34.64 points per game. But if there was an opportunity for USC to have a strong game defensively, it would be this week, because UCLA has only produced 17 points in their last 2 games. Despite USC being on the losing end of 4 games out of their last 5. And USC, they could easily have 2 more losses in the loss column, as they narrowly escaped Arizona and Cal. But Caleb Williams is a competitor, and I do anticipate that he is going to want to finish strong. I think USC wins this game, I'd say in convincing fashion, with UCLA's offense struggling. I think their defense has one of their best games, if not their best game all season long, against a struggling UCLA offense. Kansas State and Kansas, a matchup where both teams run the football and run it very well. They are both in the top 20 in rushing offense. Kansas State is 14th, Kansas is 17th. The Jayhawks lost last week to Texas Tech, 16-13, on a game-winning field goal. And Texas Tech, in my mind, they are the biggest disappointment in college football this season, as a lot of people felt like the Red Raiders should have been in the top 25 to start the season. There were a lot of people that thought maybe Texas Tech could be a dark horse in the Big 12. But right now, Texas Tech is 5-5. I remember talking a couple weeks ago about how Kansas got off to a strong start this season, just like last season. But then, once the second half of the year started, it just went downhill for them. And I was worried that it was going to go downhill for Kansas once again this season. But they did beat Oklahoma. Lance Leipold, he was due for a signature victory, and that was a huge resume booster for him. But we then saw Oklahoma lose the very next week against Oklahoma State. And I do question a little bit, how good is that win over Oklahoma for Kansas really? As we saw them beat Iowa State, but Iowa State, they were also a team that we didn't really know what to think of them coming into the year. And then they lose to a Texas Tech team that's been very disappointing this year. Lance Leipold is optimistic. Quarterback Jason Bean will be able to play in this matchup, but if he's unable to go, they will be down to third-string quarterback Connor Bellard. While Kansas State, Will Howard set a school record last week against Baylor. And we know that both of these teams will run the football in this matchup. It just comes down to which quarterback makes the throws in crunch time, and I give the edge to Kansas State and Will Howard. We've seen Kansas State compete really well in these last few weeks. They took Texas to overtime, a questionable call by Chris Klieman to go for it on 4th and goal instead of kicking the field goal and taking your chances in the second overtime. But I think Kansas State wins this game easily. I just like the quarterback play for Kansas State to be better than Kansas in this matchup, because we know both teams will run it, but Kansas State, they have the quarterback that will be able to make the plays down the stretch in crunch time. Utah and Arizona. I did not think I would be covering this matchup earlier in the season, but Arizona, they have been the most improved team in the Pac-12 this season. They're on a 4-game winning streak. Jed Fish is an underrated coach, and I have seen talks about how Eli Drinkwitz for Missouri should be coach of the year, but I think that Jed Fish should get some recognition. Arizona is 31st in total offense, and a big part of Arizona's success in these last few weeks, the emergence of Noah Fifita. 1,735 passing yards, 16 touchdown passes, and only 4 interceptions. And he's completing 73.3% of his passes. And I also want to mention Arizona was very competitive against Washington and USC earlier in the season. Utah, they had the lead against Washington at the end of the first half. They led 28-24. But Utah, they went scoreless in the second half. The big talk about Utah this season has been their defense. But last week offensively, that first half, that was one of the best performances that we've seen from Utah's offense all season long. Utah's 15th in total defense. They are 5th in time of possession. They run the ball well. They're 30th in rushing offense. And I anticipate they're going to assert the running game early in this matchup to keep Arizona's offense on the sidelines. And that is the strength of their team, as they are 90th in total offense. Bryson Barnes, he did have some good moments last week against Washington and throughout the season so far. But I have just got to go with the hot hand right now, and that is Arizona. This game, it does feel like a pick'em to me, as I do feel like this game can go either way. But I'm just going with Arizona because I have been impressed with Arizona this season. Jed Fish, he was a coach that I thought could be on the hot seat coming into the season, but he has really gotten Arizona. He's got him into a competitive program. And I think Arizona wins another matchup against a top 25 team. Georgia and Tennessee. I'm going to be honest with you. Going into the season, when I was looking at the schedules week to week, I had this game circled as potentially one of the biggest games of the college football season. A game that was going to have a major impact on the college football playoff race. And to be honest, I think it still could. But only if Tennessee upset Georgia in this game. And both of these teams, they are coming in with different levels of confidence. Georgia with a lot. A 52-17 dominant win, a statement victory against Ole Miss. Tennessee is coming in with little confidence after losing 36-7 on the road last week against Missouri. And I did anticipate that Tennessee was going to look a little flat in that game against Missouri because they were likely looking ahead to this matchup, but I didn't think that they would lose 36-7. I felt like if they were going to lose, it was going to be by maybe a game-winning field goal or Missouri made the plays at the end. But Missouri was dominant from start to finish. Cody Schrader had 205 rushing yards in that game. Georgia's ninth in total defense, their fourth time of possession. They're the best third down team in college football. Carson Beck is ninth in the FBS with 3,022 passing yards. The difference in this game for me is Georgia's running game. Kendall Milton and Dijon Edwards last week against Ole Miss, they had 186 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns between the two of them. Georgia as a team had 300 rushing yards. And if last week's any indication of how this game is going to go, I think Georgia is going to win this game easily. Despite this being a road game in Neyland Stadium, I'm going to feel like a broken record saying it because I said it last week, and I believe I've probably said it maybe 2 other times. But ever since the Auburn game for Georgia, and they had that reality check, they have been absolutely dominant from start to finish in every single game. And I think this week is no different. They go on the road, they impose their will, and they win this game handily. As Tennessee, I don't think has any confidence going into this matchup. Wrapping things up with the game of the week, Washington and Oregon State, a top 10 showdown in Corvallis. And I have no idea why College Game Day isn't going to this game. It's a top 10 showdown. What more could you ask for this late into the season? Washington picked up the win against Utah last week. After going down at halftime, they outscored Utah 11-0. Michael Penix Jr. is leading the FBS in passing yards with 3,533. They are 6th in total offense, averaging 503.9 yards per game. 5th in scoring offense. Dylan Johnson has 7 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 games. While Oregon State, a big story for them has been their defense and their running game. Last week, Damian Martinez had 4 rushing touchdowns. He's 12th in the FBS in rushing yards and leads the Pac-12 in rushing yards. Oregon State has only allowed an average of 20.5 points per game, which is 32nd. So they are towards the top 30. They're 20th in rushing offense, 19th in total offense. Washington is 99th in total defense. And a big concern for Washington as we get deeper into the season is their defense. As coming into the season, I felt like Washington was going to have the best defense in the Pac-12. They sit at 99th in total defense. But their defense has stepped up at times when they needed them to step up. Against Arizona State. A pick six that changed the tide in that game when Washington was struggling to get things going on offense. Now, if Washington is going to win this game, they need to force DJU to have to make plays down the field. Because DJU has not thrown for over 300 yards in a game yet this season. Oregon has been heavily reliant on the running game and their defense. Oregon State, they're 33rd in total defense, by the way. Now, there are a lot of talks about how Oregon State can pull off this upset. If they can run the ball well against Washington. But Oregon State may have the stronger defense in this matchup. But I do think Washington's defense does have some momentum from that second half in the game against Utah last week. Plus, I just think when it's all said and done, I just think there is too many playmakers on this Washington offense for Oregon State to contain for the entire game. Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan, he was there for a few plays against Utah last week, but he did not have a catch in that game. And I am going to pick Washington to go on the road and win this game. Michael Penix Jr., he has another masterclass this season. And he is who I feel like should win the Heisman this season. As I feel like he's been the best player in college football throughout the year. And I think with another big performance, going on the road in a top 10 showdown, college football playoff hopes on the line, if he steps up, he should be the winner of the Heisman Trophy. And I think Washington wins this game. I do think Oregon State does make this a game. But I just think in the end, there's just too many playmakers on Washington's offense. And that will do it for my Week 12 college football predictions. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And enjoy the football this weekend. The NFL picks will be up tomorrow. And we are winding down to the college football season. Just a couple more weeks until we find out who will be the 4 teams competing in the college football playoff.